Hello everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. I was just doing a little bit of computer housekeeping. And now I'm going to do a little bit of normal desk housekeeping and get my chair in the right place. And you really come here for the comedy value, don't you? That's not, it's not about books, it's about the comedy. Yes, well, and I'll move my microphone so you can actually hear me properly. Here I was thinking I had everything set up properly, and not at all. Papers everywhere, digging microphones out from underneath other things and other cables. This is going to be noisy, sorry. Block your ears. Right, that's a bit better. I think we've actually arrived. We've settled. We're just about ready to go. I just want to type one thing more in my moderator's side of things. Right. Anyway, we shall carry on. Here we go. We are reading, currently we've been reading this slightly odd little book called The Sun's Babies. And it's written by a lady called Edith Howes. I think she was born in England, but she grew up and spent almost all of the rest of her life here in New Zealand. And she was a teacher. And she was a slightly unusual teacher in that she believed that children need the opportunity to actually learn from real experience and learn about real things, not just, this is how to be good and all that sort of stuff. Behaviour modification, which a lot of old-fashioned teaching at the time was based on. So she taught children about how flowers work and how they produce fruit and all that sort of thing, life cycle of tadpoles through to frogs spawn right through to frogs, all that sort of stuff. And one of the things that she found was really useful was to do it through stories. So we have a whole lot of stories gathered together in a book. She's actually done this for several books, but this one is probably in some ways the most fragmented, where every section, they're not actually listed as chapters, they're sections, every section is a whole new story idea about something in nature. Most of the book has been about flowers and insects and other critters on the land. The last reading that we did was about things in the sea. And so we've been reading those. We haven't quite finished those. I think we've probably got another day after today of reading for the whole book to be completed, and then we'll go back to a more traditional story style book. But one of the things that she did when she was writing about actual things like the life cycle of moths or butterflies or dragonflies or fruit, any of those sort of things, one of the things that she did was to make it a little bit more appealing for young children. She had fairy elements, magical elements in it, although she still did actually talk about real things like pollination, stamens and antlers in flowers, seed pods, all that sort of stuff. So it's quite an interesting little combination that she managed to come up with, but how she was able to take complex scientific ideas and make them a little bit more interesting and possibly even more palatable for young children. I'm just going to adjust my camera slightly. There, I don't feel like I'm got my chin on the edge of the desk. Right. For those of you who are new here, hi, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories. I've been doing that for online for the last year and a half, most of the time, 3 days a week, here live on Twitch, and then the recordings go up onto YouTube as playlists for each book. They're rough reads, they're not polished audiobook style reads, because I interrupt myself. I sometimes lose where I am in a sentence. I will explain things, whether it's a strange old-fashioned word that the author at the time thought didn't need explaining because it was very common, but it's not anymore, or something where I've actually had a little bit of experience of what they're talking about, which I think that maybe other people haven't had that experience, and so are wondering what it is that the author is talking about. So I'd often interrupt with that sort of thing. It's a little bit more like bedtime stories than audiobooks. So audiobooks are all beautifully polished. The accent doesn't slip. Sometimes they even use special voices for different characters. You don't have bangs and clatters and people going or ah, or stopping to have a drink or a cough or something like that. But here we do those things. It's more like, as I say, bedtime stories. This is like we're sitting around and I'm reading you a story. That's what it is. Just like with bedtime stories, Mum, what does that mean? Okay, well, we deal with that. I don't tend to chat with the online chat mechanism while I'm reading a chapter, but between chapters, if there's anyone who's got questions that I think are appropriate to discuss, I will talk about those, or even ask people. I have had it happen where I've asked, does anyone in chat know what such and such is, because I'm in the middle of reading a chapter, and someone will find that out, and then I'll read out what their explanation is that they've found for us when we get to a chapter break. So the only requirements I have for you are actually more suggestions than requirements. One, make sure you've got some, preferably water, but something to drink so you stay hydrated. I mainly say this because I need to do this. If I'm reading out loud, it's very easy to get a dry throat. But if I stop and have a drink, it's a good idea for you too. Another good thing to do is to have a snack handy so that you can stay concentrated on what we're doing instead of having to lug your computer with you somewhere, or your phone, whatever. And then the third suggestion is somewhere comfortable to sit. I do understand if you are working, studying, focusing on something else, but you want something to keep your brain occupied. If you want to listen to me, I don't mind if you're not focusing on what I'm doing. I'm quite happy to just be the chat and the chatter in the background. Not a problem at all. So we shall carry on from here with reading The Sun's Babies by Edith Howes. And the section we are reading now is another one of the Under the Sea, another one of the sea-based sections, and this one is number 7. I can't remember what all the others were, but we've had sea anemones and fish, I think, starfish, we've had starfish, and a whole lot of other things. Anyway, this one is number 7, Through Days of Growth. And if you're wondering about the weird noise in the background here, either it's my desk wiggling and squeaking, or it's the rain on the roof. My office has a chimney right next to it, and the chimney is a metal one. We get a lot of wind noise when it's windy weather, but we also get the rain hitting the roof, but also on the chimney, and the metal of the chimney transfers the noise quite a lot. So I just, in case you're wondering about the noise, hopefully I'm reading loud enough for you to be able to hear me over the noise of the rain. So we shall continue reading. The Sun's Babies by Edith Howes, Section 7, Through Days of Growth. On a grassy tableland, a pair of albatrosses made their nest. They dug a ring of earth and pushed it into a central mound, then hollowed out the top and lined it with grass. Here the mother laid her one white egg. I'm just trying to sit a little closer to the microphone so I'm louder than the rain for you. Father and mother took turns in sitting on the egg. Hang on, I'm pretty sure that we... No, that is... Sorry, there was another section that we read that had a similar sort of a feel to it. I was just checking that I wasn't reading it again. Father and mother took turns in sitting on the egg. When the little one was hatched, they again took turns in feeding him and sheltering him from cold sea winds. All through the summer days and nights, they tended him with utmost love and care, until when autumn came, they could safely leave him in the nest. Then back to their old sea life they went, skimming the rolling waves throughout the day, but winging their patient way at each fresh dawn to feed their little one. When they had left him, there the baby albatross sat in his nest, day after day, week after week, month after month, his thick brown coat of down keeping him warm. His rich morning meals supplied his growth. His stillness fattened him. Motionless he sat, hour by hour. Above him seabirds wheeled against the bright blue sky and golden sun. Winds danced among the grasses, storms drove over the hills. Half a mile away, the racing waves boomed loudly up the beach. At night, the quiet stars looked down on his contented sleep. A wild duck came and looked at him. "How slow you are," she cried. "Why don't you move? My babies learned to fly and swim long months ago, yet they are not so old as you." He turned untroubled eyes towards the sea. "Some day," he said, "I shall follow where the white waves lead. My time has not yet come." The wild duck flapped impatiently. "Slow," she said. "If you were mine, I'd turn you off that nest before another day had passed." She flew away. The baby albatross still sat and watched the sky and sun and listened to the waves. Summer came again. One afternoon the parent birds returned. They stroked their little one and fondled him with loving beaks. "Dear one, you must leave the nest." His mother said, "We need it for this season's egg." The baby was dismayed. "But I do not wish to go. The nest is mine," he said. "It is not good that you should stay too long in it," his mother said. "You are nearly 12 months old. It is time for you to fly and swim. Come off and exercise yourself." But the baby was afraid. "I don't know where to go," he said. "I must stay here." He would not move. Between the mother and the father passed an understanding look. With their strong bills they gently turned him off the nest and rolled him on the ground. Pick yourself up and go down to the sea," laughed the mother. She sat on the nest to keep him off. The baby picked himself up and looked at them. It was hard to understand this treatment after all their loving care of him. However, he had rather liked his feelings when he flapped his wings to right himself, so he flapped them once again. He raised himself and tried to fly. He waddled several steps on his wide webbed feet, but he was fat and heavy, and his limbs were soft and quite unused to exercise. He was soon glad to rest. "Keep at it," said his mother. "Power will come with use." For several days he stayed about the nest, encouraged by the parent birds to exercise his wings till he could fly. Then very slowly he made his journey to the sea, walking, flying, resting, sleeping on the way, for many days and nights, till at last that long half-mile was passed and the welcome beach was won. Here he learned to swim and catch his food, the juicy cuttlefish that floated on the sea. He grew and gathered strength, but his flights from land were short. His power was not yet at its full. Another year passed by. Again, with autumn days, the parents left the nest to go to sea. From the waves a noble bird rose up to accompany them. His snowy plumage glistened in the sun. His widespread wings cut through the air with a majestic grace. It was the baby albatross, grown at last to his full strength. Sailing, gliding, rising high above the shining waves, dipping low on downward curve, he followed to the far-off, shoreless tracts, there to live his life of tireless flight, the splendid marvel of the sea. Unlike a duck, an albatross stays on wing for a very long time, some parts of the year, and so therefore you don't want an albatross chick to leave the nest too soon, because it will die if it doesn't have the capability to fly for long enough or strong enough. I'm just going to adjust my camera settings slightly. Sorry. I've just realised how slightly odd my lighting appears to be. and then we shall carry on reading. I keep looking across to my other screen. I'm not sure if it's me or if it's actually just that I am looking into a light, and so therefore it's not looking quite the way I expect. Tweaking. It's odd. Anyway, that will do. There we go. And we shall carry on. That was the end of that section. That was about the young albatross. And I'll have a drink of water, and you're welcome to too. Carrying on. Section 8 of the sea. Fanny Flatface. It's an odd one. Where the waters of an estuary entered the sea, there were many wide and sunny shallows. Here the flounders fed and... Come on, turn around. Sorry, I'm just turning around my little old MacBook, not MacBook, iPad mini. It's a first generation one, so it's a little bit slow sometimes. Anyway. Here the flounders fed, and here in early summer their little eggs, laid in the quiet water, rose up and floated at the top, rocked on the gentle waves, warmed daily by the golden sun. The eggs hatched into flounder babies. Hundreds and thousands of them there were, crystal clear, except for 2 black eyes, and so very small that they could only just be seen. The tide came in and swept them to and fro, and somehow Fanny lost the shoal and was carried out to sea. There the big waves jostled her about. The great sea creatures frightened her. She was lonely and sad and terrified. Whatever will become of me, she thought. On the 3rd day she fell in with a shoal of tiny whitebait, all about her own age and size. I am lost. Please let me swim with you, she begged. You poor little thing. Of course you may, they said. So for several days she swam with them towards the shore, playing and feeding in happy forgetfulness of all past misery. At this time she was so like the whitebait that no stranger could tell the difference. She had the same long, slender body, the same round head and pointed tail. A week passed by. One day she said, I must go down to the sand. Goodbye. Before they had time to speak, she had dropped from their midst. How very extraordinary, they said the whitebait to each other. For a day or two they played about as usual, but by and by one said, The thought of Fanny worries me. Suppose we go down to see what has happened to her. A good idea, said the others. They found her lying aslant near the bottom of the sea. Are you sick? Why won't you come up? They said. You looked very queer, lying on your side like that. I feel very queer, she said. Can you see what is the matter with my left eye? Whitebait crowded round to look. Why, it's moved, said one. It seems to be coming round the corner of your head. I thought it felt strange, said Fanny. What a comical shape you are, said another little fish. You seem to be growing flat. Oh dear, I wonder whatever is the matter with me. I don't think I shall ever come up to the top again, sighed Fanny. The others tried to cheer her. Don't be downhearted, they said. Perhaps you will feel better tomorrow. Maybe you have eaten something that disagrees with you. But what a pity! She is certainly losing her beautiful shape, they remarked to one another as they swam away. And that eye is a most mysterious business. So they're saying she's a strange shape because they liked the shape she was before. It was the same sort of shape that they have. They came back again a day or two later. Fanny, could it be Fanny, was on the sand. She wriggled up to meet them, and they stared more and more. She was not now long and slim, but flat, and wide. And her eye, it had gone quite round the corner and was now on the same side of her head as her right eye. Strange to say, she looked perfectly happy. "I am well again," she said. "See, my eye has gone round out of the way, and I am so flat that I can lie comfortably on this nice sea floor. Isn't it splendid?" "It's a very ugly change," said one. "Oh dear, do you think so?" asked poor Fanny. "At any rate, the change is more convenient." "Most convenient," she went on, brightening. "See, one lies on the sand, so. One's flatness allows one to wriggle partly under the sand so as to escape one's enemies. And one's eyes are both on top, where they are most needed. You'd better come down and grow flat, too." "Not for the world," cried the others in chorus. "What a life, lying in the sand, and what an ugly shape. Are you going to stay here always?" "Yes," said Fanny, "the food here suits me." "Goodbye then, we're off to the top," they said. As they swam away, one impudent little creature turned round and called, "Goodbye, Fanny Flatface." And that's how poor Fanny got her name. "How are you today, Fanny Flatface?" the thoughtless little fishes would call as they swam over her head. They thought it was a clever thing to say. She would bury herself in the sand and pretend not to hear, but it made her most unhappy. She thought of all the other fishes she had seen. "None of them are flat," she said, "and none of them have two eyes on one side of their head. How dreadful I must look." Lonely and miserable, she lay there for months, keeping herself well hidden from sight. One day she left the spot, hardly knowing why, and floated with the tide into the estuary mouth. An estuary is where a river opens into the sea, and it's the bit where it's partly fresh water and partly seawater, and it's usually wider, and there's often mud flats around the edges and things like that. Floated with the tide into the estuary mouth. A sunny shallow seemed to draw her with the memory of early days. She swam boldly in. Yes, this was her old first home. What had become of her brothers and sisters? Would they receive her now that she had changed so terribly? The mud floor moved, and scores of flounders raised themselves and looked at her, flat as herself, and each with two eyes on one side of the head. What comfort! She was no monstrosity after all. "Who are you?" they asked. "Fanny," she replied. They all came out to look at her. "Why, it really is Fanny," they exclaimed. "But how you have grown! How bright your red spots are, and how softly silvered is your underside! How white and strong your teeth! You are certainly the beauty of the family. Have you come to live with us?" "Yes, oh yes," she answered joyfully. What happiness was hers after the long months of shame and loneliness. It was a pleasant life they led. By day, while the warm sun shone, they basked below the mud. At night they feasted on the shoals of shrimps and jointed darting creatures that filled the water over them. As they slowly moved from bank to bank, their upper skins changed colour with the colour of the floor on which they fed, and thus securely hid them from their enemies. One day the white bait, grown now to little herrings, came up the estuary. "Why, there is Fanny Flatface," said one. Her sister flounders rose beside her. The herrings gasped in wonder. "So that was just your way of growing up?" they said at last. "Just my way of growing up," said Fanny cheerfully. It's a good lesson for us all. We have to just be who we are. Yes, you can learn and grow and improve on things, but if you are you, there's no point in trying to be someone else, is there? Break time, another mouthful of water or more. Section 9 of the sea portion of the book. The Oyster Babies. The Oyster Mother was talking to her babies. "You are leaving me to make your own way in the sea," she said. "Keep in mind what I have so often told you, that everybody bigger than yourself is an enemy to be avoided. Here is something else to remember. When you are tired of swimming about and wish to settle down to grow your shells, choose a clean, gravelly bank or a firm rock floor. Sand or mud, if you choose those, would sift into your shells with every tide, and you would soon be choked. And when your shells are made, never forget that an oyster's chief concern in life is to know when to shut up. A moment too late in that, and life is over for you. The babies swam out of the shell. This was not their first expedition, but in former times they had stayed near their mother, ready to slip in at the first scent of danger. Now they were to take care of themselves. No babies could have looked less fitted to do it. So tiny were they that the whole 300 of them, placed head to tail in a line, would not have measured longer than one's middle finger. 300 of them. Less that long or less. Baby oysters. Boneless, shellless, weaponless. Their only safeguard was their water-like transparency. It seemed impossible that creatures so tender could live in the savage sea, where hungry monsters roamed incessantly in search of prey, yet they were not afraid. Perhaps they were too young to think. Up they went. Near the surface of the sea, they met a shoal of cousin babies. "We are going to travel before we settle down," said the cousins. "Will you join our party?" "We shall be delighted," said the babies. The shoal set off. There were millions now darting here and there, their tiny round bodies flashing like crystal globules through the water, their belts of swimming hairs wafting the microscopic creatures of the sea into their ever-ready mouths. For days they travelled, growing every hour a little larger, but still defenceless in the savage sea. Sometimes lurking enemies dragged off stragglers from the edge of the shoal. Sometimes a great fish drove through their millions with his mouth wide open, swallowing all that came within his path. Then the ranks closed up again and went onwards as before, but the shoal was smaller than at first. And the babies grew more watchful. At last they were tired and a little frightened too. "Let us find a settling place and grow our shells," said one. They sank to the sea floor. It was sand. This would not do. They drifted on. The sand gave place to mud. That would not do either. They drifted on again. At last a stretch of gravel, clean and firm, lay beneath them. "A splendid place," said the babies, joyfully, remembering their mother's words. Down they dropped, each one settling on a stone, and there fixing himself for life. Now came the marvellous making of those strong shells, which were to be their safe retreat from every enemy. Furnished by the rich seafood, a limy fluid formed in each soft baby's body, to ooze through tiny pores in his outer skin, and there to harden into shell. Day by day, week by week, the beautiful growth went on, till a 2-walled house was made, with lustrous pearly lining, and a powerful hinge to pull the edges of the walls together. At first the shells were thin. Hungry whelks, finding them, could bore round holes in them with their sharp pointed shells, and so reach the juicy babies. Wandering starfishes could clasp them in their long ray arms and swallow shell and baby whole. But as the months and years passed by, and the surviving babies grew to greater size, layer after layer was added to the shells, until at last, rock hard and strong, they kept out all intruders. Now the oysters were secure. From helpless, shellless, reckless babies, they had grown to cautious, well-defended dwellers in the sea, living quiet lives in peace within their firm shell walls. When no enemy was near, their shells lay open, their fringed, delicate gills were hung out and waved to and fro to catch their food. But at the first alarm, there was a quick withdrawing of the gills, an instantaneous closing of the shelly walls. To the enemy, all was firm, locked, silent, hidden. The babies had grown into full knowledge. They had learned when to shut up. There you go. And that's the end of the sea section. And now we're going to get into some more intriguing creatures. But I will have a drink. Sun's Babies by Edith Howes. Fanny Fly. Rover the dog left a bone only half cleaned under the fence and forgot to go for it again, so Mrs. Fly laid her eggs on it. In a day or two the eggs hatched out into tiny white creatures with no legs. They ate hard for a few days at the meat left on the bone, then settled down and kept still while they changed into flies. When they broke their way out of their old skins, you could hardly believe they had once been white and helpless, for now they were dark in colour, with wings that gleamed as they moved, and wonderful eyes, and feelers, and legs. Fanny Fly was one of them. She was a beauty. Her eyes were big and red-brown in colour, and so wonderfully made that she could see behind her just as well as in front. From each side of her chest 2 fine wings sprang out, gleaming with green and red. Under them were her 2 balances. On her back she wore a shining purple cloak. She had 6 legs, all jointed so that she could bend them in any direction, and all furnished with the most wonderful things, claws and suckers for holding on to the roof, and tiny combs and brushes for keeping herself neat and clean. She flew first to the garden and sucked honey with her short tongue from any flowers that were not too deep. Then through an open window she flew into the house. "Here I shall have a good time," she said, and a good time she certainly did have. She melted sugar in the basin with the juice from her mouth so that she could suck it up. She sipped honey and treacle from the jars in the pantry that were left uncovered for even a moment. She stood on the meat and sucked juices out of that. Nothing came amiss to her. Whatever was there became food to her, so she was always fat and happy. She played with the other flies on the window panes and across the ceiling. They all danced in the air and buzzed till they were tired. She had many narrow escapes from spiders in dark corners, from dusters, and from small boys who wished to catch her. Once she was nearly drowned in a dish of jam. On the whole, however, she had a very good time. But the summer drew to an end and the winter came. "I must find a snug corner or I shall die of cold," said Fanny Fly. She looked for a hiding place in the house, but the best corners had all been taken by other flies, so she slipped out through the window and crawled into a clump of grass roots and stalks under a hedge. There she went to sleep till the warm days came again. And there you go. That's the end of that section. Did you know that that was how flies live? Did you know that they use the spit from their mouths to liquefy their food so that they can drink it? Yuck. This is why you cover your food so the flies can't walk all over it. But also very intriguing to actually understand how it works. We're going to carry on with the next section, At Sunset. This will be about a different creature, probably. At sunset, a tiny pool lay looking up at the cloud-flecked sky. His water spiders and insect babies went about their eager business beneath his surface, but he took very little notice of them. His thoughts were busy with the clouds so far above him. All day he was longing to be with them. The evening came and the clouds flocked round the setting sun, turning gold and crimson in the wonderful light. Then the little pool longed more than ever to be with them. "If that could only be my life," he sighed, "to live in the blue sky and to be made beautiful." A passing wind heard his words and repeated them to the clouds. They told the kindly sun, and he sent a message by his sunbeams to comfort the little pool. "You shall come up here some day," he bade them say, "but you have many duties to perform before you can be a sunset cloud. Do well your present work and wait with patience." Then the pool rejoiced. Day after day he did his lowly work with infinite care, nourishing his flowers and rushes and tiny water creatures, and turning a bright and patient face to the sky and his loved clouds. One hot day the wonderful change came. The sun looked down, saw the work so well done, and gently lifted him through the air to the sky. This was glorious. He was now a fluffy white cloud, sailing over the sky and joining the other clouds in their games and dances. In the morning they played shadow flight across the hills of the earth. In the afternoon they danced slow dances high above the sea. The time of sunset came, and the new cloud wished to go with the others to be made beautiful, but they said, "No, little brother, that is not possible till you have done cloud work." So he was left lonely and white in the east, untouched by the sun's lovely light. In the night came his old friend the wind. "You are to go down again to the earth," was the message it brought. It blew coldly on the little cloud till he shivered and fell in 1,000 drops of rain upon the earth. There the drops lay till morning amongst the grateful flowers and grasses, giving them fresh life and bearing bravely the disappointment of being sent to earth again. The sun looked down in the afternoon and raised him up, and once more he floated joyfully across the sky. Then the fierce storm wind came and froze him with its icy breath. Down he fell again upon the earth, this time as clattering hailstones. "This is all very trying," he said, "but it seems to be my work, so I must not grumble." Again he was drawn up. Then the snow wind came and silently froze him into feathery snowflakes and drove him down upon a mountainside. Here he lay for many days, till at last he was drawn up once more. And now the sun said, "You have done well and waited patiently, little cloud. Tonight you shall have your reward." So when the time of sunset came, the little cloud sailed into the west with the others. There the sun smiled at him and shone so gloriously on him that he turned golden and red and glowed more brightly than any there. And what she has explained in most of that little story is the water cycle, which is evaporation and falling, precipitation and evaporation and precipitation and evaporation and precipitation. We shall carry on with a poem, The Summer's Tears. The little clouds ran off to play across the summer sky. Their sunshine mother called them back. They all began to cry. Their tears fell down as drops of rain on dusty garden beds. The flowers opened wide their cups. The leaves held up their heads. And "Thank you, gentle clouds," they said, "for drops so big and wet. We were so thirsty, did you know? Don't leave off crying yet." That's the end of that one. And I shall have another drink of water so we can keep going. The Wheat People. It was spring. The winter storms were over. The sun was beginning to warm up the earth, and everything was stirring. Under the ground, the wheat babies were pushing off their warm blankets and struggling out of their cradles. "We wish to go up now and see what the world is like," they said. They pushed and pushed until at last their heads were above the ground, and they could see what the world was like. "What a beautiful place," they said. "How blue the sky is, and how golden the sun. All around the birds are singing." They grew tall and graceful and waved and nodded to one another across the field. Now it was early summer. The wheat boys and girls had grown up and were busily building their little houses. Such dainty little houses they were, with shining walls and polished floors and delicate green silk hangings. Then the wheat people stood on their doorsteps and waved feathery flowers out of the doorways as a signal to the wind. "We are ready to be married," they called. "Come and marry us, please." The wind came blowing gently out of the west, took them on its broad wings and carried them to one another's houses to be married. The birds sang, the sun shone, the crickets played the wedding tune on their little banjos, and the wee wheat people were as happy as could be. The later summer came, and in each house the door was shut to keep the draught from the dear wee baby that had come. There was no time to stand on the doorstep now, for everybody was busy feeding the baby and making a store of food for it when father and mother should be gone. Autumn came. The wheat people turned golden, for they were growing old, and gold, not grey, is the sign of age amongst the wheat people. In each house the baby lay in its cradle, wrapped in snow-white blankets and surrounded by rich white food for the winter. The reaper thundered into the field, and the tired wheat people fell gratefully before the sharp knives, for they were glad to rest. "Our children are provided for, and that is all that is necessary," they thought, as they lay dying in the sheaves. Winter came. The field was ploughed and bare, but in the barn the new wheat babies slept in their snug cradles till they should be placed and the warm, moist earth, and the time of spring and growth should come again. And on to the next section. Chick-a-pick. That's an interesting one. Chick-a-pick lived in a round white house with shining walls. All about him was white, soft food. He floated at the end of a ball of yellow food. He himself was only a speck. Have you found out yet that his house was an egg? So Chick-a-pick is an egg. Well, an embryo in the middle of the egg. He grew bigger, for Hen Mother sat over him day and night, cuddling him under her warm breast. Every day she turned his egg house over so that he should grow evenly. Each time she did that, he floated from the bottom of the egg house to the top to be nearer the warm Hen Mother. This kept him moving and made him grow strong. As he grew, he used up the white food and the yellow food, till by and by there was no food left in the house, but only Chick-a-pick. Have you found out yet that Chick-a-pick was a chicken? One day he wished to come out. He tapped on the inside wall. "Peck hard," called his mother. "I will help you from the outside." Chick-a-pick pecked hard with his little new beak. Hen Mother pecked softly with her big strong beak, and presently a hole was made. Out popped Chick-a-pick's head. "Cheep," he said. "Well done, little son," said his mother. "Now push with your shoulders and break the shell." He pushed and pushed with his new little shoulders till crack went the shell in halves. Out he stepped. Have you found out yet that Chick-a-pick was strong? "You are the first. Cuddle under my wings till your brothers and sisters come out," said the Hen Mother. "Cheep, cheep, cheep," went the brothers and sisters, one after the other. Chick-a-pick listened and watched from his snug corner. "Now we are all here," said the Hen Mother at last. "Cluck, cluck, cluck. What a fine brood you are, yellow and black and white, and all covered with the softest, prettiest down I ever saw. How dainty your toes are, how bright are your eyes." She led them out for a little walk. "Cluck, cluck, cluck," she said. "See, here is soft food spread for you. Cluck, cluck, you may have it all. I shall not eat till you are satisfied. I could not bear my chickens to go hungry. Cluck, cluck, eat plenty, eat plenty." Have you found out yet how kind Hen Mother was? We used to have chickens. We used to have bantam chickens, which means that they're a lot smaller than normal sized chickens. And we used to get eggs from them, but also some years we would let them lay eggs and sit on the eggs on the nest and hatch out chicks. And they would be these little round, yellow, fluffy balls of fluff with the tiny little beaks and cutest little feet, and they'd be chip, 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 sort of noises that they were making. And the hens would go, they wouldn't go cluck, cluck, they go and they'd call the chicks to go with them when they found some food. And in fact, our chickens, the rooster was of a particular variety that's very good with the chicks. A lot of roosters, you keep them away from the chicks because they're dangerous to them. But the particular variety of rooster that he was very good with the chicks. In fact, he would help look after the chicks just as much as the hens would. He would forage around and look for food, and then he would call the hen and her chicks to come and eat the food that he had found for them. And he would make sure that they all got some, make sure that they were all there at the right place to get the food. We shall carry on. Chick-a-pick's crow. The chickens ate fast and grew fast, and feathers came where down had been. Chick-a-pick was the strongest of the whole family. He certainly ate the most. One day Hen Mother said, "You are old enough now to take care of yourselves. I am going to lay eggs. Chick-a-pick, you are the biggest. Look after the others, and always remember that the strongest should help the weaker ones." At first the chickens could not understand the change. They followed Hen Mother as they had always done, and ran to be fed whenever they saw her eating. "This will not do," she said. "You must learn to find your own food, or you will never be ready to take your places in the big world." At last she pecked them and drove them away from her, for she was wise. "Come with me," said Chick-a-pick to the others. "I will take care of you." He found food for them and called them to it, as he had heard the big rooster call to the hens. There you go, that's like our ones. At night they huddled together for warmth in their coop. It was then that they missed their mother most, because she'd always kept them warm. "Cock-a-doodle-doo," sang the big rooster from the top of the fence. How Chick-a-Pick wished he could do that. It was such a beautiful song. The notes rang out so far that he felt sure that they must be heard all over the world. If only he could make a song like that. "I will try," he thought. He jumped on a tub. The others crowded round to look at him. "What are you going to do?" they asked. "I'm going to sing like the big rooster," he said. He flapped his wings and tried, but no sound came. Again he flapped and tried. This time a sound came, but such a sound! He nearly jumped off the tub with surprise at the queer noise. His brothers and sisters ran away in fright. "Don't do that," they begged. "It's terrible. It sounds like a dog barking." And I'm just going to interrupt again. Yes, young roosters, when they're learning to crow, make the weirdest noise. They really do. "Perhaps it will be better next time," said Chick-a-Pick. "I'll try again." He tried again, whilst the others stood against the fence to watch. Flap, flap, flap. "Adoo, adoo," he shouted. Oh dear, why wouldn't it come out right? It was really a very ugly noise. "It is dreadful," said the others. "You will never be able to sing like the big rooster, so you may as well give up trying." "I shall go on trying," said Chick-a-Pick, "for that is the only way to learn. Go away if you don't like the noise. I am going to practice." He practiced. Presently the sound grew a little better. He practiced again the next day. The sound grew better still. He practiced again the third day, and at last, hurrah, out came a real cock-a-doodle-doo. He did it again and again. Yes, there was no mistake. The song was not so loud and clear as the big rooster's, but it really was the real song for all that. Some day it would grow more powerful. The brothers and sisters heard him and came to listen. "Well done, big brother," said the sisters. "Now we see what comes of trying." "You can do it. If you can do it, so can we," said the brothers. They jumped on the tub and practiced as he had done, and by they could all crow. And the way it's written, cock-a-doodle-doo, is not what they sound like. They sound like "Arr, arr, arr." And they have their own versions of it. Every rooster has their own version of that sound. Anyway, and you don't really want to hear it first thing in the morning when it's really early before you want to get up, but they will wake you up if they're nearby. So there you go. I'm going to carry on with the next section after I've had a drink. The Gorse-Mother. The Gorse-Mother lived hidden away in the middle of a big gorse bush on a hill. She was an extremely busy person, for like the old woman who lived in a shoe, she had so many children, she scarcely knew what to do. She had not whipped them all soundly, for she had a tender heart, for all her thorny looks. But she had put them to bed, wrapped in their little brown blankets. They lay in hundreds all round her. You would have called them buds, but they were little gorse babies. The Gorse-Mother was tired, for the making of all those blankets had been a great work. But she knew there was no rest for her yet. The sunshine grows hotter every day, she said. The children will soon find the blankets too warm. I must make their satin tents. She set to work at the satin tents. After several weeks of labour, she had them ready. How beautiful they were! They were yellow and scented, with fluted sides and a peaked top, and the daintiest green velvet mats for the floor. The children sprang out of bed and danced with pleasure at finding their tents all ready for them, and the Gorse-Mother's heart was glad, for now, for a while, she could rest. Those are gorse flowers that she's just described. The sun shone, the birds sang, the golden satin tents swayed in the wind, and everybody was happy. In the afternoon, a bee came. "May we ask him in, Mother?" asked one of the children. "Certainly. He is your best friend," said the Gorse-Mother. They asked him in, giving him nectar from their little cups and making him very welcome. As he left, the Gorse-Mother said, "Tell the other bees that we invite them to a nectar feast tomorrow." The bee flew off. He told the other bees of the Gorse-Mother's kind invitation, and next day they came in scores to the nectar feast. What a day that was! Nectar cups were filled to the brim, and the bees were feasted royally. They stored the sweet juice in their bags for the hive and filled their little hair baskets with pollen. They flew from tent to tent and became most friendly with the children. Weeks passed by, and the Gorse-Mother roused herself to work again. The children are growing fast, she said. I must make their elastic houses. She unfastened the walls of the satin tents and let them fall away. Where each tent had stood, she built a green, elastic house. Strong and tightly shut were these little green houses. On each floor stood a row of tiny stools, like you sit at for a bench. The children were tired after their weeks of pleasure. They were quite content to do nothing all day but sit on their stools and grow. Sit still and be good, said the Gorse-Mother, and remember to grow big. Your houses will grow with you. As you turn brown, they will turn brown, and as you turn black, they will turn black. After that, you may go out into the world. Things happened exactly as the Gorse-Mother said they would. As the children grew, their elastic houses stretched so that there was always room for them. When the children turned brown, the houses turned brown, and when the children turned black, the houses turned black. Now remember what I tell you, said the Gorse-Mother. When your houses pop open, jump as far out into the world as you can, for if you fall close to me, you will have no room to grow and spread. When you reach the ground, the first thing to do is find a soft place, and the next thing is to grow. And don't forget to grow plenty of thorns. Now goodbye. Make big bushes all round me, and I shall be proud of you. One by one, with a noise like tiny pistols, the houses popped open. The children remembered their mother's advice. They jumped far out into the world, found a soft place, and grew. In a few years they were big bushes all round the Gorse-Mother, and she was proud of them. Yeah, that's what they do. Not that they're sentient. The elastic houses with the little stools in. Gorse is a legume type of plant. So that means in some ways they're related to beans and peas and other things like that. And they make pods which have the seeds in. You don't go eating them. It's not like real green peas. And if you ever open up a pea pod, you will see similar to what they're talking about here. If you open up a pea pod, which is a long thing like this, and it opens out like this, it has along the edge where the two halves join together, little wee bumps that poke up, which are kind of stool shaped, and the round pea sits on top of this little bump, and that's what supplies it with its food as it grows into a bigger and a bigger pea. And so that's what happens with gorse seeds. Did you know that? Also, what do gorse flowers smell like? Not just one flower on its own, but when you have a big gorse bush covered with flowers and it's letting its fragrance out so that the bees will come. They smell almost like a particular type of old-fashioned suntan lotion called, what's it called? I'm not sure what it's called, but it's kind of got a coconutty smell. It's quite unusual, not what you expect. If you are somewhere and you haven't smelled it before and you're out where there's hillsides that are covered in it and it's flowering and it's reasonably freshly flowering, you'll smell this like tropical blend, coconut oil, suntanning lotion. It's not the same, but it has a lot of similarity to it. Not what you're expecting to smell, I can tell you that now. It's quite a surprise when you discover it. But yes, obviously the bees like the smell and it draws them in. There you go. I'm just going to check how far through we are. Right, and we shall carry on. Actually, I'll just have another quick look at that. I'm just trying to work out how far I've come and how far we are likely to get today. Wondering at the time. Anyway, we shall carry on for a bit longer yet. It's nearly 4 o'clock here in New Zealand. The Sun's Babies by Edith House. The next section we're going to read is called The Proud Paling Fence. Everything else has been alive so far. This is a different one, except for the pond. The pond became a character in its own right. Such common-looking little things. Whatever are you? Asked the paling fence. He was new and very proud. He stood up so straight that he could see all over the garden. Indeed, he thought himself the master of it. The seeds had been planted close to his feet so that he felt he had the right to question them. The biggest seed spoke up from her place in the ground. Excuse me. Just now we are only seeds, she said, but we think we shall be something bigger and finer some day. We have a feeling inside us. Feeling indeed, snapped the fence. Ugly little black things that you are. What feelings can you have? I can't think why the gardener put you near me. He stood straighter than ever and would not look down again. The little seeds felt shy and rather sad, but they said nothing. Day after day they lay quietly in the ground, waiting for something to happen. And then something did happen. For by and by they all began to swell. Bigger they grew and rounder and softer. One fine day several of them cracked open, and the next day several more. From every crack a little white shoot pushed itself out. It pushed and it grew and it turned down and was burrowed into the earth, for all it wanted was water and darkness. From the top of each little shoot grew another shoot. Another shoot peeped out. It pushed and it grew and it turned up and peeped through the top of the ground, for all it wanted was fresh air and sunshine. At last a long row of white little shoots looked out through their holes in the ground. That's from all the different seeds. The sun looked down and saw them. Dear me, he said, this won't do. Go down, sunbeams, and tell those shoots to change their colour. The sunbeams came flying down. You must change your colour, little shoots, they said. Hurry up and turn green. The great sun cannot bear to see white shoots above the ground. The shoots turned green at once. They do. The sun is what makes them go green. They react and go green. The other ones that went down are the roots. The paling fence was angry. The idea of the sun taking notice of such common things, he grumbled. He has never yet sent a message to me, though I have been here quite 2 months. I hope those shoots are not going to grow tall. They will hide me if they do. Now that is just what the little shoots did. They grew taller every day. They sent out leaves and branches on every side. Soon they stretched out waving hands towards the fence. Please allow us to hold on to you, they begged. We are not strong enough to grow so tall alone. The fence stood more stiffly than ever. No, don't you dare to touch me, he cried. They turned themselves this way and that. They tried to cling to him, but he would not help. He would not help them. This is dreadful, they sighed. Whatever shall we do? Next day, the gardener came. He brought a hammer and nails and cord. He drove the nails into the fence and tied the cord up and down and across. Now the waving hands had something to cling to. The fence was so angry that it really could not speak. Then I am to be hidden, he thought. So new and handsome as I am, too. The gardener must be mad. The sun shone. The birds sang. The green plants grew. Only the fence was unhappy and cross. At last he was almost hidden from sight. Oh, well, he said, it's everybody's loss. He said it loudly, but nobody was listening. Buds formed on the plants. They burst open. Out sprang bright flowers like fairy boats to sail on the summer winds. Rose and blue and purple and lilac, how their soft colours glowed in the sunshine. Tiny yellow-hatted ladies sat in each boat to spread the sails. They scattered scent about and invited the bees to afternoon tea. The tea was delicious and the bees went away buzzing their thanks. Such beautiful boats, such dainty little ladies, they said. The paling fence could hardly bear it. Stupid things, he muttered. But wait till the gardener comes. He will surely cut them down when he sees how I am hidden. The gardener came. A friend walked with him. How beautiful your sweet peas are, he said. They make a splendid covering for the fence. Yes, the gardener said, the fence was necessary, but it was very ugly. Now the sweet peas have made it beautiful. The fence heard the words. At last it understood, and its foolish pride was broken. For a long time it stood thoughtful and silent. Well, well, it said slowly, I have been very much mistaken. But if I can't be beautiful, I can at least be kind and friendly to those who are beautiful. And from that day the paling fence and the sweet peas stood happily together. They smell wonderful. Have you ever grown sweet peas? They're called sweet peas because of their scent and their flowers. You don't eat them. No, they're poisonous, the seeds. They're unlike what they call garden peas, which are or green peas, which are the ones you do eat. And I'm going to carry on reading with the next section, Tail Up. Tail Up was the queerest looking caterpillar in the garden. He would persist in walking on his front 3 pairs of legs and sticking all the rest of his long body into the air. Nobody could help laughing at him. He had several pairs of legs at the back, but after one look at them, he refused to use them. Nobody could call them legs, he said scornfully. They're only suckers. So he walked on the front legs with his tail stuck up high in the air. No wonder everybody called him Tail Up. Before he was a day old, he started off to see the world. His mother had never left the little basket house in her life, but Tail Up was different. He wanted to see everything there was to be seen, and also to eat everything there was to be eaten. What an appetite he had! Nothing came amiss to him. He had no teeth, but his strong jaws could do quite enough damage to the plants in the garden. What a greedy fellow you are, said a woolly brown caterpillar one day. I have a good appetite, I know, but your life is one long meal. Let him alone, said a passing bee. Let him eat all he can. The time will come when he will live quite without food. Both caterpillars stared. Whatever do you mean? Said Tail Up. Wait and see, said the bee. I believe you're talking nonsense, said Tail Up. He hurried away to find another meal. He was never at a loss for food, for when he had devoured all the choicest bits off one tree, he dropped to the ground by a silk rope and made his way to a fresh one. This silk rope was another of his oddities. He kept whole coils of it in his body. When he wanted to reach the ground, he brought the end of one of the coils out of his mouth and gummed it on the branch where he sat. He then slid off the branch hanging by the rope. Slowly and carefully he came down, letting out more rope as he needed it till he reached the ground. There he broke the rope and hurried away to climb the next tree. After a day or two he thought, I will make a house. It shall be just like Mother's, smooth and cosy inside, but so strong that nothing can break its way in. He set to work to weave a basket house, doing a little each day between his many meals. He drew a silk thread out of his own body and wove the house round and round his upreared tail. It would be tiresome to have to go back to it each night, he said, so he carried it with him. He looked more comical than ever now, going about with his partly built house on his tail. He fastened tiny twigs here and there on the outside to deceive the birds. They will think it is a stick, he said, and thus I shall be safe. He put a strong silk thread round the wide end as a drawcord. Now the little house was finished. He could crawl in, pull the cord to shut the door, and safely go to sleep. Just about this time he began to lose his appetite. Dear me, this is very remarkable, he thought. I wonder if that bee was right after all. I certainly feel queer. I think I'll have a good long sleep. He hung his house to a branch of a tree, crept into it, tied the front door securely, and went to sleep. And there he slept on and on, day after day, night after night, without ever waking to eat. While he slept, skin and little legs shriveled up and fell away from him, and a new skin, hard and thick and scaly, took their place. This is a queer state of affairs, he said, waking for a moment. I feel quite different. He slept again. Another change. 6 long, thin legs grew, tightly packed away under him. Some soft, feathered wings and feelers slowly came. He woke again. I must go out into the world, he said. Wriggling and pushing, he worked himself half out through the back door of his house. Wriggling and pushing still, he cracked the hard chrysalis skin and sprang onto the top of his house. He unrolled his feathery wings and waved them fast in the air to dry them. What a fine fellow he was now! How the sun shone after the long darkness of his house! How beautiful was the day! Goodbye, old house, he said. I shall never need you again, for now I can fly from my enemies. He darted swiftly through the air to lead his new life. A new life indeed, for he never again needed to eat. I wonder which of the butterfly family or moth family that is. It's definitely not a bag moth because they don't come out. But which of the butterflies and moths never eats? Don't know. That'll be interesting. Another drink. I'm just going to see where we're up to compared with the rest of the book. And we shall carry on. This section is called The Rain Fairy. A rain fairy sat up from her sleep in a pink poppy, stretched herself and yawned. Oh dear, she said, it's morning again and I have to work. It's the same old work day after day on the same old earth. How tired I am of it. I think I will go up into the blue sky and play with the sunbeams and clouds. It must be lovely up there. She flew up into the sky. For some time she wandered about admiring the strange and beautiful things in this new land. When she grew tired of that, she went to the sunbeams and said, May I play with you? We are not playing, said one of the sunbeams politely. We all have our day's work to do. I am just going to ripen the early strawberries, and my little sisters are coming to help me. Our cousins over there have to look after the roses. Indeed, we're all too busy to play. She flew off. The fairy went to the white morning clouds. Play with me, please, she begged. We really have no time just now, said the little clouds. We have a shower and a rainbow to prepare before noon. Dear me, everybody seems to be as busy here as we are down on the earth, thought the fairy. She wandered about again till the afternoon. Then she went to the afternoon clouds and asked them to play with her. And here's a picture. She went to the afternoon clouds and asked them to play with her. See? And that's actually the basis of the picture that they used on the original cover. And it was done as they printed the picture and then they cut it into an oval shape and then they glue it and press it into the cover. Actually, no, this one wasn't an oval shape. Some of the other versions of this book had it done as an oval shape. And if you're watching this live on Discord, or even a recording on, not Discord, on Twitch, you'll actually see a picture up there which shows that same illustration in the far corner of the screen there, where it has a cover shot of the book. But I have seen versions of it where it's done as an oval shape, where they've cut an oval of the picture and then pressed it into the cover. We will carry on. And it had said, she went to the afternoon clouds and asked them to play with her. We are far too busy, said the afternoon clouds. We have to shade 2 hills and a valley from the heat of the sun and make a crown for the mountains you see below you. The rain fairy could not find anyone who had time to play, so she had to spend the day by herself. It was dull and lonely, but she would not go down to the earth. They surely must play some time. I will wait and see, she thought. Sunset came and the clouds and sunbeams all passed in turn before the great sun to report to him of their day's work. The rain fairy went with them, for she saw that each one passed on from the sun to a great cloud hall where a star dance was to be held that night. Soon she herself stood before the sun. "A rain fairy in the sky," said the sun in surprise. "What have you done today, little rain fairy?" The rain fairy hung her head. "I have done no work," she said. "I was tired of working on the earth, so I came up here to play." The sun's kindly smile changed to a frown. "Then you may not go to the star dance," he said. "Go back to your work on the earth. We have no time for play here till our day's work is done." The fairy returned sadly to the earth, but she had learned her lesson. She took up her work again and did everything well. She closed the dainty flower cups that the rain might not wash their colours out, and dried the soft petals again when the shower had passed. She hid the butterflies and moths in dry hiding places when it rained hard, and she covered the wee birds in their nests. Day after day she worked patiently, remembering how the sunbeams and clouds found no time for play. One day the sunbeams came to her with a message. "The great sun has watched your work," they said, "and he is well pleased. He bids us to say that as a reward you are invited to the star dance tonight." Next section after the next mouthful. We're reading The Sun's Babies by Edith Howes, and it's a book with fantasy descriptions of natural things from the earth, the plants, the wildlife, and even the oceans. Fantasy because it talks about fairies and things like this, and it personifies things like plants and seeds and things as actual creatures, even though we know in real life they're not. But scientific in some ways because it kind of explains how some things work scientifically but using fantasy terminology or sometimes the real terms. And we shall carry on with the next section, The Disobedient Sunbeams. The story ended only today, but it began thousands and thousands of years ago. In those days the sun shone as he shines now, and the sunbeam children had their work to do before they were free to play. Just as they have now. Some had to coax the flower buds out of their cosy blankets. Some had to stroke the round cheeks of the berries till they turned red. Some had to slip through the clear water to nurse and comfort the fish babies. But in those days there were 5 little sunbeam brothers who liked to play much better than work. Sorry, I just need to clear my throat. And then I'll carry on. And yeah, I've just got something going on the other screen and I'm just trying to deal with that at the same time. So we shall carry on. Here we go. Yes, I lean sideways sometimes to look at things because it's just behind something else that's on my screen. It must look a little bit odd, but that doesn't matter. We shall carry on. One more mouthful. The Sunbeam Brothers. But in those days there were 5 little Sunbeam Brothers who liked to play much better than work. Day after day they played at hide and seek between the leaves of a tall tree instead of doing the tasks that were set for them. Time after time they were warned, but they would not reform. At last the sun, in his anger, punished them with a terrible punishment. "Enter into the trunk of the tree," he commanded. "Now," he said, when they had tremblingly obeyed him, "you shall remain there as long as the tree remains. When it falls, you shall be free, but not till then." This was a dreadful sentence to the sunbeams. To be shut away from the light and the air and the other sunbeams was bad enough, but to have to endure it all through the life of the tree was worse. They dared not rebel, however. They had to submit quietly to their imprisonment. The years went by and the tree lived on. But a worse fate came. Just when the tree was growing old and their freedom seemed near, the whole forest sank, and the sea flowed over it. Tons and tons of sand and gravel were brought by the waves and flung upon the forest, choking it up till the tops of the great trees were covered. The 5 crouched in despair at the foot of their tree. They could not die, for death is impossible to sunbeams. But how were they to be delivered now? Under this great weight of earth and water, they might be imprisoned for thousands of years before anything happened to release them. And that is just what happened. For thousands of years the forest lay under the sea, not decaying, but slowly changing from wood to coal. Then a change came. The land was pushed up again by heat from below, and by it rose high above the sea. But now the trees were hidden by the earth above them, over which grass and plants soon grew. The sunbeams were still imprisoned. Then one day men opened the earth and dug out the coal, and the piece containing the sunbeams was placed on the fire and burned. At last freedom had come. Quivering with joy, the 5 sunbeam children sprang out and danced on top of their prison house. "How bright those flames are, and how they jump," said the children, sitting around the fire. The coal burned to red embers and fell to the bottom of the grate. Spark, spark, up flew the 5 sunbeam children out through the tall chimney to live again their life of work and play. "It was a dreadful punishment, but it has taught us a lesson," they said. "I am glad to hear it," said the sun. And that's the end of that section. That's a different way to explain flame from coal. Never thought of that one before. Intriguing. She does come up with, the author, Edith House, does come up with some very intriguing ways to explain scientific things. We shall carry on with the next section. White-Briar. She grew at the very end of the rose garden, next to the road, and that is what vexed the other trees. That's intriguing. "You are only a common briar," they said, "and yet you are placed in the most prominent position. Everybody who passes you can see you, while we are half hidden by your spreading branches." "Look at us," cried the red roses. "Are we not worthy to be seen? Our petals are like rich velvet, not pale and colourless like yours. In the morning light we glow like massed rubies, but you cannot glow at all." "We are like bits of sun brought down from the sky," said the cloth of gold roses, "and yet you have the presumption to stand between us and the passers-by." "If you were even a sweet briar, it would not be so bad," sighed the tea roses. "But you have no scent, so what is the use of you?" Then the biggest of the pink roses spoke. "You have only 1 row of petals," she said severely. "That stamps you at once as of low birth. We others are all of higher growth than that. Look at my petals, set so closely one above the other that you cannot see between them. You are a nobody, and yet you are allowed to retain the best position. It is most unfair." White-Briar had listened to it all in a sorrowful silence, but now she spoke. "I am sorry indeed to be in the way," she said. "I should be glad to be at the back of the garden, for I know you are all much more beautiful than I am. But I was placed here, and here I am bound to grow. I cannot help having only 1 row of petals and no scent. It is my nature." The other roses only turned their backs on her at this, but the bees crowded into her flower cups to comfort her. "Don't take any notice of their jealousy," they said. "If you have only 1 row of petals, still they are so white and delicate that they can compare with any in the garden. If you have but little scent, you have a sweeter heart than any rose here. We love you best of all, and will do our best to carry your pollen well, so that your seed balls may be well filled." The summer passed. One by one the roses faded and showered their petals on the earth. Autumn came, and the green leaves turned red and yellow and then brown, and they too dropped upon the earth. Winter came. The proud rose trees stood bare and thorny, shivering in the winter storms. But White-Briar was not bare. Her roses and leaves had indeed faded, but the little seed cases below the flowers had grown into green balls that swelled and turned red, and now the whole bush was hung with scarlet berries. How they glowed as they swung in the wind! The passers-by stopped to look at the bush. "What a beautiful rose tree," one of them said to the master of the garden. "What a glorious bit of colour in this gloomy winter weather." "Yes," he said, "that is why I planted the tree in the front of the garden. In the summer there are many beautiful flowers everywhere, but in the winter there are so few that it is good to have a tree like that where everyone can see it." Then the proud roses were ashamed and begged White-Briar's pardon. "You are more beautiful than we are now," they said. But White-Briar did not grow conceited. "It is nothing," she said. "I must grow according to my nature, that is all. But my heart is singing for joy that I am beautiful at last." There. And I'm thinking that that might be the end of today's reading. Yes, it is the end of today's reading. We shall carry on next time with a section called A Trip into the Country. I shall bookmark it so I know where to come back to. And that's it for today. I will see you next time. But before we go, I will give you 2 links. One is to Discord. Nope, wrong. Sorry. When I can't see some of my buttons, it's a bit weird to try and find them to type with. Right, so Discord is where, if you wish to, you can chat about the different stories we've been reading. You can share pictures or ideas for new books that we can read, new old books, because I read old-fashioned books. They are generally public domain books, ones that are no longer within copyright, or if they're not quite public domain, they're very old. And children's focused rather than adult focused. What else about them? It's a good place to chat, because if you write something in my chat box on Twitch and I'm not there to see it, I won't see it because it won't show it to me after you've gone. The only people who can see it are the people who were there at the time it was written. That's just the way that Twitch chat works. But on Discord, you can actually keep chatting. And we're trying to actually add different channels within our Discord server for the different books, so people can share pictures to do with the book. If I can find illustrations for any of the old books that I've read, I put them up there. Background information on some of the stories, things like that. You're most welcome to come and join us there and share. And the other link that I've just given you is YouTube, which is where, if you have been listening to me reading live on Twitch or even listening to the VOD, I then take the recordings and do a little bit of editing, so it's just the video picture itself, which is this bit here without the overlay surrounding it, except for the little bit of colour that's on the edge of that. And I put them up over on YouTube, and I put them into playlists so people can listen to a whole sequence of videos that are a book. Most of the playlists there are just one book per playlist. There are a couple where it's like more than one book in a playlist, but that doesn't matter. And so if you want to catch up on anything that you've missed, it's 2 weeks after when I actually went live that they go live over, they get uploaded to YouTube. So for Twitch, if you want to know when I'm reading, click the follow button if you are a Twitch user, and it's free to be a Twitch user. Click the follow button, and then Twitch will tell you when I'm reading. And if you are on YouTube, if you hit the subscribe button, it will show you in a list when I'm live and when I've put something new up. And if you click the bell icon that's next to it, you can actually then be notified if I have put a new video up. And you're most welcome to like or dislike the videos if you want, and even put comments under them. There you go. I've had a few people actually say that they've discovered the last part of a story, that the book that they were reading at home had a few pages missing, and suddenly now that they can actually conclude the book because they've actually found someone who was reading the book that they didn't have the last 2 pages of, or 2 or so. And I've also had people who have been able to share books that were their own favourites with other family members, and they've become favourites for them as well. They'll probably go on and actually read the books for themselves, but I'm quite happy to read books to you. So please come and join our community in whatever location suits you. And we'll see you next time.